Hello. Today's episode is about the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, but it's also going to be a live experiment. In fact, the experiment is already started. Just by watching this right now, you are already part of it. And I'll explain that in just a moment. But at the real core of what I'm talking about today is that I say that we are all living in the Epstein economy. And by that, I mean that what Epstein did to girls and young women, the economy is doing to you, to all of us right now. And there's a reason why we accept it. So how can this be an experiment, a real-time test? Well, this is because whenever you post a video on YouTube, you get a forensic breakdown of who's watching, where they're watching, and how they watch. Now, listen, I don't know who you are. I don't mean it's that kind of level of detail. I don't know your names or email addresses. You're still watching privately. But for the purposes of this experiment, I get information as to when people stop watching. And in a future episode, I'm going to show you the audience behaviour for this episode right now. Because if the science is right, I think I can predict the points where I lose a lot of you. And so what am I basing that assumption on? Well, there's this bit of science from a psychologist at the University of Oregon called Paul Slovic. And he spent his career studying something he calls psychic numbing.
So when we think of empathy, we usually try to understand empathy as putting yourself in the shoes of another person so you can understand how they feel and what kind of person they are. But what if there are two people? How do you put yourself in the shoes of two people?
So he showed people a photo of a single starving child, a 7-year-old girl from Mali called Rokia. And he asked the people that he showed it to donate money to help her. And people donated. Then, to different people, he showed 2 starving children, Rokia and a boy called Musa. Same situation, same need, twice the suffering. But when he showed that photo with 2 children in it, donations went down. And then Slovic showed a third group of people, Rokia's photo, alongside statistical information about the scale of famine in Africa, like the millions affected and the systemic causes. All of the information there. And donations collapsed. Adding the statistics, the facts to the individual story, the numbers literally switched off the emotional response that the single face had triggered. And here's how it works. Your brain processes quantities on something close to a logarithmic curve. The jump from 0 suffering people to 1 suffering person feels enormous. From nothing to a suffering face, a name, a story. But the jump from 1 to 2 feels smaller.
The psychic numbing reflects the fact that the very first life is the most important life to protect. And the curve rises steeply from 0 to 1. 2 lives don't feel twice as important. And then by the time we consider some larger number, like say 87 lives are threatened, and then we learn, oh no, it's 88, you won't feel any different for 88 than 87. It's on the flat part of the curve. It's not that we become insensitive, it is that we start to lose feeling completely. We don't feel the reality and we walk away, we don't care.
By the time you get to 200,000 or to 8 million, the numbers are just numbers on a screen. And it recalls what Stalin said, right? 1 death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths is a statistic. Which is true for every single human death, right? It's a tragedy. Except, ironically, for Stalin, which was a cause for great celebration. Thanks, Stalin. So now let's talk about the Epstein economy. And there's a reason I use that specific phrase, the Epstein economy. 5 things that Epstein did that the wider economy also does, but at a scale that your brain literally cannot care about. So, the 5 behaviours. 1. Concentration of wealth.
Is your money dirty money?
If you live,
I just asked a question. Is your money dirty money?
No, it's not. So, in fact,
why is it not dirty money?
Because I earned it.
Jeffrey Epstein accumulated hundreds of millions of dollars through financial relationships that are so muddy and opaque that nobody can actually fully explain where his money came from.
These financial relationships are complicated. They're large sums of money for an opaque set of services that were being offered. And I think that's adding to the complexity of figuring out how did somebody build such wealth, build such power.
Which is impressive, isn't it? Because I don't know about you, but I feel like we live in a world where you can track a Domino's pizza in real time on an app, but somehow hundreds of $1 million can just be, oh, where are they? And he used that money to buy silence. He used it to buy people. His wealth didn't just enable his crimes, it was the mechanism. Concentrate enough resource in one person and with no accountability, and everything else follows. Now, the richest 1% of people on earth own more wealth than the bottom 95% of all the people on the earth combined. And multinational corporations shift profits into tax havens at a rate that costs governments, the IMF's own estimate, up to 600 billion every year. And you'll notice that if you try to avoid paying your taxes, they will find you in a shed in Wales. But if you're a multinational, oh, your profits live in Ireland now? Oh, that'll be nice for them. I hear it's lovely over there. There's a bastard in Wales, though, that owes us £1,200. And the most devastating fact of all that is that the poorest countries lose the highest percentage of tax income. The nations least able to absorb that loss get extracted from the hardest. That's the same behaviour. Both Epstein and corporations. Wealth concentrated beyond accountability. Used to buy access, silence and compliance. When one man does it, you think predator. When multinational companies do it, you think, well, that's just how markets work. Nobody thinks, well, that's just how predators work, I guess. Well, you can't stop predators. I've seen the film. Behaviour 2, the removal of consequence. So Epstein's 2008 plea deal, he's accused, right, of sex trafficking, and he's found guilty of it. He gets 13 months in a private wing of a county jail with work release 6 days a week.
Between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m., Fridays through Wednesdays, Jeffrey Epstein is allowed to leave his temporary home here at the Palm Beach County Stockade. Instead, PBSO says Epstein comes here to the West Palm Beach office of his Florida Science Foundation, an arrangement enjoyed by how many other convicted sex offenders?
That's been asked, and we are looking into that.
Critics expect the answer is none.
That's a man buying his way out of consequences. Now, in 2024, TD Bank pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering for drug cartels. Their employees even joked in internal messages how easy it was that 92% of their transactions, 18 trillion, went unmonitored. The fine, 3 billion. Their annual revenue, over 35 billion. The fine was about 5 weeks' earnings. That's not a punishment. That's a subscription fee. Thank you for your monthly payment to the Department of Justice. Your premium crime package has been renewed.
Think about Citigroup. Just this month, the OCC fined the bank $70 million for ignoring a 2012 order to beef up its anti-money laundering controls. In May, Citi was fined by the Fed $97 million for letting Mexican drug cartels launder money through the bank. And Citi isn't the only one. Other big banks break the law, they get caught, and then they shrug off fines that barely dent their massive profit.
3. The capture of politics. Epstein dined with princes, he flew with presidents. His black book was a directory of global power. And the lead prosecutor who gave him the plea deal, Alexander Acosta, was later appointed to a cabinet position. Now, corporations spent a record $4.4 billion on federal lobbying in 2024. And a recent study found that companies lobbying for a specific tax break got $220 back for every $1 spent. That's a 22,000% return. You can't get that from Bitcoin. You can't even get that from cocaine. It's the single best investment in human history, buying a politician. And it's technically legal. It's just called advocacy. And the revolving door between government and industry means that people writing the rules and the people lobbying against them are often literally the same people at different career stages. Just look at where politicians end up. Epstein captured individual politicians. The economy captures the political system itself. 4. Manufacture of desperation. Epstein deliberately targeted girls whose economic circumstances meant that they could be recruited for $200. He didn't just exploit existing vulnerability. His network sought it out. It was his business model. Right now, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, children as young as 6 are mining cobalt, which is the mineral in your phone battery, your laptop, your electric car, and they're mining it by hand in tunnels up to 100 feet deep. No safety equipment, no ventilation. Children have been buried alive in tunnel collapses.
The United Nations, which is based in the DRC, says that there are at least 40,000 children working in these artisanal mines in the southern part of the country. How many are working on cobalt as opposed to other minerals, we don't know, but it's clearly a very large problem.
40,000 children right now as you watch this.
CDM has its own smelting operation, which processes the ore before exporting it to its parent company in China. Heyo Cobalt sells its products to component firms in China and South Korea. Those companies sell their products to other battery manufacturers, with the final product, lithium-ion batteries, sold to household names in Japan, Europe and the USA, like Apple, Samsung, Microsoft, Sony and Volkswagen.
The families of the dead or maimed children sued Apple, Google, Microsoft, Tesla and Dell, and the court dismissed the case because it ruled that buying cobalt in a global supply chain doesn't count as participation. And when I read that, 6-year-olds being buried alive so that my phone could charge, and the court said it doesn't count, I felt, that's corporate capitalism. And then I moved on to the next thing. The desperation is the point. The desperation is what keeps cobalt cheap. Those children aren't mining cobalt because they choose to. What do you want to be when you grow up, Jimmy? I'd love to be able to mine some cobalt. You can do it right now. Epstein needed desperate people. The economy manufactures them and then calls it supply chain. 5. The normalisation of deviance. Everyone around Epstein, right, knew. How do we know they knew? Well, because he'd already been convicted of sex trafficking. He'd been to jail, and they decided to look the other way. Elon Musk asking about coming to parties. Richard Branson to Epstein, please don't forget to bring your harem with you. He said that to somebody convicted of sex trafficking. Bill Gates asking a convicted sex trafficker for advice on STDs. They'd either accepted Epstein's justifications or they looked the other way. But it is absolutely the normalisation of deviance.
I was at the edge of this man's life.
You described him as your best pal.
Yeah.
Our company has not been aware that any of our legitimate suppliers has hired child labour in their mining sites.
At the time, there was no indication to me or anybody else that that was what he was doing.
Volkswagen said,
"To the best of our knowledge, the cobalt in our batteries does not originate from the DRC.
I never saw anything."
Microsoft said,
"We have not traced the cobalt used in Microsoft products through our supply chain."
This very week, Meta is on trial for deliberately designing Instagram to be addictive to children. There are internal documents showing that they knew it was driving self-harm and suicide in teenagers. And the prosecution's opening words were Meta puts profits over safety. 300 million reports of child sexual exploitation online last year alone. And Meta's defense? Section 230. We are not responsible for what happens on our platform. Like, imagine running a nightclub and somebody gets stabbed every single night and your defense is, we just provide the venue. Can't help it if people bring in knives. We've accepted economic behaviours that if one person did them to another person in a room in front of us, we would call it abuse. Chill out, it's just business. Epstein did all 5. The economy does all 5. Why can't we feel it? I can say it and you're like, yeah, I get that. Yeah, okay, yeah, I get that. Why can't we feel it? And there is a deep evolutionary reason why that is. And it's worth understanding for this, because your brain is the most expensive organ in your body. Obviously, mine isn't. I got my brain from Poundland, according to some of the comments on my YouTube videos. But your brain is 2% of your body weight, but it burns 20% of your energy. A fifth of everything you eat goes to keeping this thing running. It's like having a sports car engine inside a bicycle. Metabolically, it's insane. It's a really expensive organ. So why would evolution do that? The anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent decades studying brains, and in particular primate brains. And he found across dozens of primate species that there's a direct relationship between the size of the neocortex, the outer layer of the brain, the part that handles complex thought, and the size of the social group that species live in. So the bigger the neocortex, the bigger the social group. And that's remarkably consistent across primates.
Our social world is effectively constructed by what we can handle. And this is just part and parcel of our biological inheritance as monkeys and apes, as members of the primate family, that within the primates there is this general relationship that relates the size of the social group to essentially the size of the brain. And we seem to fit in that pattern.
And the idea is this, that primate brains didn't get big because of tool use or navigation or finding food. They got big because of each other. Because living in a social group, tracking who's friends with whom, who's trustworthy, who's a dickhead, who's cheating, who's what to whom, is the most computationally demanding thing a brain can do. Every relationship you have is a dynamic calculation, and multiply that by everyone in the group. It's like a whole civilization of people constantly going out and splitting the bill. Ugg had mammoth hide. Bog had tusk. Who had the stegosaurus spores? Stegosaurus spores? But that's what your brain is built for, not global supply chain ethics. When Dunbar plugged the human brain size into his primate regression equation, and he asked effectively, how big a social group should an animal with this size of neocortex be able to handle? And the answer came back at roughly 150. And that's called Dunbar's number. And you see it everywhere. It's the size of hunter-gatherer clan. It's the military company. It's the point at which a company starts to feel like you don't know everyone anymore. It's the average number of people at a wedding, believe it or not, which, by the way, explains why so many weddings feel so stressful, right? You're literally at the limit of your species' cognitive capacity. Now, Dunbar's number has been debated, so there's a little bit of give as to what that is. Like, for example, in a 2021 study by Lindisfarne, he tried to replicate the analysis and got variable intervals, like between 2 and 520. And so they argued that you can't actually pin down a single number. And while the exact figure is fuzzy, here's what matters for us, right? Is the exact number doesn't actually matter. What matters is the architecture. Your brain, this extraordinarily expensive organ that evolution spent millions of years building, was built to handle social information at the scale of a village. Whether it's 100 or 200 or 500. It is not 8 billion. But every empathy circuit, every trust instinct, every sense of fairness and reciprocity and outrage that you have, all of it was forged in small groups where you could see the people affected, where the victim had a face, where threats had a voice, where immunity meant someone you knew getting away with something you'd seen. Your brain is an extraordinarily sophisticated social computer, but it was built for a local network, and the Epstein economy runs on a global one. That's not a design flaw in you, it's a design advantage for people who find themselves at the top of a system. And this is why the name, the Epstein Economy, is useful. I don't say that name, the Epstein Economy, for clickbait. It's not a provocation. It's a neurological intervention in a way, right? Because your brain already has a file on Epstein. That file is soaked in emotion, disgust, rage, the physical gut level. This has to stop response. Your amygdala fires, your mirror neurons activate, you feel it, you feel the outrage of it. So the phrase Epstein Economy takes that file the one that your brain can actually process and feel. And it wires it to the economic data that your brain would otherwise just file away as numbers. So when I say, I don't know, corporate profit shifting costs developing countries 200 billion a year, you feel almost nothing. The number is too big, the victims are too far away. But when you say that was what Epstein did at a scale that our brains aren't built to feel, the emotion circuit can re-engage because it now has a face. The name Epstein Economy is kind of a hack, right? Because right now, if you try and explain this stuff, like this corporation stuff, if you try and tell your mate down the pub that corporate tax avoidance kills people, that supply chains run on child labour, you can literally see people's eyes glaze over. Like, you've got about 4 seconds before they're mentally ordering another pint. But if you say that the economy does what Jeffrey Epstein did to the same people but at a bigger scale, that 4 seconds can maybe become a conversation because you've given them a shorthand, like a handle, something that their brain already has feelings about. In my next video, I'm going to expand this a bit because in the same way that your brain can't feel the scale of the problem, it also can't feel the power of what you can do about it. But for now, the next time somebody says, that's just how the economy works, yeah, business as usual. Every time a politician shrugs and says, what can you do about tax avoidance? Every time a corporation pays a fine and calls it the cost of doing business. Every time a child is buried in a mine so your phone can charge. We've now got a name for it, and it's the Epstein economy.